Well, welcome to week 8. We've made it to the end of the course, Political Science 1101, Intro to American Politics. And this week we're going to be talking about public policy, domestic and foreign. There's a lot of information to try and squeeze into a couple of days. So what I'm going to be asking you to do is hit the highlights, make sure to think about the questions that I pose for the test, and then for both chapters 16 and 17, but then also we'll have the final exam, and that'll start on Monday at midnight and will be due by Tuesday at 11:59. And I'll talk more about that in this presentation. So to kind of wrap up our summer session about how we are thinking about American politics and particularly Bitzer's approach, by now you should be well thought of in terms of the game of power, which leads to politics. And for this particular section, we're going to be focusing on policy. We've done a lot about politics, the ideas, the values, the principles that the American Democratic Republic is founded upon, the players in the game of politics, and then the government institutions. Now we're going to be looking at the decisions, or sometimes the lack of decisions that are made by those in politics that create public policy. That policy then creates bias, leads back to power. All of this is wrapped up in the game's ideas. When it comes to government action or inaction, a lot of it is structured by how have the ideas, the principles, the values of American politics been played out. Certainly the players are core components of what government chooses to do, what government chooses not to do. Those decisions about government actions or inactions are played in the fields, the institutions, the places, Congress, the presidency, the courts, the bureaucracy. Those fields, places can also be players in terms of thinking about what policies are being adopted. So this week, the final week of the course, we're going to be talking about government decisions to do something, or government decisions not to do something. That is the basic crux of public policy. Public policy can be thought of as being created because of the power of government. When government has the authority to do things, that is the idea of public policy. But public policy is also influenced by our politics. What do Democrats believe in? What do Republicans believe in? What do interest groups want? How is the media presenting issues? What is public opinion about? All of those things come together with the power of government to create public policy. And in particularly, we think of public policy, for those of us who study it, in two distinct ways. The first, domestic policy, that is internal to the United States. What are some areas that inside the U.S. government, inside America, decides to do? But then we also have foreign policy. That is the relationship of the United States and the rest of the world. Two very broad topics. In fact, I teach a course called Public Policy and Politics, which kind of covers this. Dr. Feeney, the other political scientist, teaches a course entirely on U.S. foreign policy. So if you're interested in any of these areas, please don't hesitate to take an upper level course. Would love to have you in it. So in thinking about public policy, again, think about whether government chooses to do something or chooses not to do something. The choice of government to act or enact or have inaction on a particular issue is indeed public policy. And again, it is shaped by the ideas, the values, of our political system. Sometimes there are areas that government does get involved with, but perhaps at the beginning chose not to. Education. Education was actually an area that was privately done. If you could afford to go to school, you could go to school in early American history. It wasn't until the middle of the 1800s that really states and local governments started to become involved in education. Influenced by the players in the game, how political parties, how interest groups, how voters, how candidates campaigning for political office all think about public policy is certainly an influencer in the area of public policy. It is then created, it is approved, and it is implemented by the institutions or the players. Congress has a role, the president has a role, courts have a role. Certainly when it comes to the bureaucracy, we've seen the power of implementation can certainly have an effect on public policy. And all of this impacts citizens, which only furthers the game of politics by enhancing power to one group over another. So again, the two primary fields of public policy, when we talk and you read through, you'll see discussions about economic policy, social policy, agricultural policy could be an area, environmental policy, and education policy. When it comes to foreign policy, again, you'll see some overlap here between domestic and foreign, and that's very intentional and almost a kind of both of them interacting on a particular area, say economics. Economics just doesn't stop at the water's edge or at the borders of the country. Economics has an influence, particularly in our globalized economy. The climate, national defense and security, how the United States interacts with different countries, and how different countries interact with us. That's all the area of international relations. And so thinking about first focusing on domestic policy, some of the core questions to think about is, what is public policy? How is it defined by the authors of the textbook? And then what are different ways to think about public policy? In particularly, public policy oftentimes is described as producing goods or services. And what are these different types of goods, both public and private? And what are the different ways to think about these goods in terms of public policies? When it comes to the different types of domestic public policies, how is the American government involved in each of these areas? How is it involved in social policy, in economic policy? Different areas to think about. Who is involved in shaping public policy? All of the players that we've talked about before certainly have roles in shaping public policy, but there are others that also are involved in shaping public policy. And then also, how is public policy produced? What's the process? Something that you will definitely want to know for the test. And then finally, what theories have shaped the development of U.S. economic policy? We're going to focus a little bit on economics because it has such an important role in American politics, in American government. But in particularly, what are the key ideas and the tools that have shaped the public policy dealing with the economy? And in particular, how does the Federal Reserve influence economic policy? Again, all these questions will be in Blackboard. When it comes to foreign policy, think about, in comparison to domestic policy, what is foreign policy? And in particularly, there are some key ideas and terms that are associated with foreign policy. Typically, you'll find it in the textbook, words that are sometimes in bold, sometimes they're not in bold, but make sure to identify the key ideas and the terms associated with foreign policy. What are the challenges to foreign policy for the United States? What are some of the different tools to implement or carry out U.S. foreign policy? Again, much like with domestic policy, you can look at different ways to implement, to carry out U.S. Domestic policy. Same thing with foreign policy. Who are the key players and actors in U.S. foreign policy? You'll have read in domestic policy that there are some very specialized players in that development of domestic policy. There's also some key players in foreign policy. And then think about who may have more power when it comes to shaping U.S. foreign policy. And then finally, what are the different schools of thought when it comes to shaping that U.S. foreign policy? Some of the ideas, some of the principles, some of the values are all carried out in different schools of thought. And in particularly, what are the current issues confronting the U.S. when it comes to foreign policy? So by Sunday evening, what you should do is understand the basics and the dynamics of public policy, both in terms of domestic and foreign. But specifically, you should post an article in the discussion board about an issue either related to domestic policy or foreign policy. I'll have it set up for one for both. All you have to do this time is post the article. You should explain the article. You should develop why this particular article is important. How does it relate to some of the key issues in the chapter? But you don't have to reply to other students. Okay, so no replies, just your posting, your explanation, and then the link to the article about domestic and foreign policy. And then also you need to do a personal journal entry. And this will be one entry for both domestic and foreign policies. Starting at midnight on Monday, you'll have access to the final exam. And I should also say you should take the test for domestic and foreign policy. That'll be one test covering both areas. For your final exam, starting at midnight on Monday, what I want you to do is to first review your personal journal entries. Over the past 8 weeks, you've been submitting personal journal entries about different topics, about different ideas. You should go back and review all of your personal journal entries and kind of take a look at how you have seen things develop over the past 8 weeks. Then you'll write your final personal journal entry, which will be your final exam. And here what I want you to do is to write at least 1,000 words, more is better, and that address the following. And you can structure it however you want to. You may want to take each question and kind of develop paragraphs that answer these particular questions. What do you now know better about American politics than when you began the course 8 weeks ago? We've covered a lot of material. I give you that. But what I want you to do is think about that first personal journal entry that you had, what you were coming into the course, having understood or know about American politics, and now reflect back over the past 8 weeks. What do you now know that you know better about American politics? And then in the next section, I want you to address each of the following topics to demonstrate your advanced knowledge in each area. So for example, at the beginning, we talked about America's history and the creation of our republic. Those are what we would call the political theories and the development of our American politics and government. What do you now know? What do you better understand about America's history and the creation of our republic? The players in American politics. This again is the idea of political behavior. What do you now know about the various players in the game of politics? What do you now know about the governmental bodies, the structures in American politics? This is the political institutions, primarily focused at the national level. So Congress, the presidency, the courts, the bureaucracy. And then finally, the governmental decisions and actions in American politics. the public policy. So kind of in the middle of your last personal journal entry, you should kind of think about each of these 4 areas. Give me a sense of what you know now, how this has shaped the way you are thinking about American politics. And then finally, how do you now view American politics after taking this course? What's your sense of American politics? Again, if you choose to use it as a game, that's perfectly fine. If you have another theory, another approach to viewing American politics, that's certainly welcome as well. So basically 3 main sections, the middle section divided into 4, that's what you should be writing for your final exam in terms of your personal journal entry. So in addition, what I want to do is let you know that in calculating your final exam, after everything has been submitted and graded, what I will do is replace your lowest test grade with the average of your test scores. Now, I will take out the lowest test grade that you have, but I will replace it with the average of all of your other test scores. Again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to let me know. I hope you've enjoyed and learned something about American politics, and certainly there are other courses in American politics. I'd certainly welcome any of you to join those classes as well. Hope you have a good rest of the summer break before the fall semester. Take care.